The lawyer's voice was polite, almost bored, as he read through the will. To my eldest daughter, Hannah Cross, I leave the family home on Laurel Ridge. There was a murmur of approval, polite smiles, even a few congratulations from people who'd come just for the gossip. Then came my turn. To my younger daughter, Lila Cross, the lake shack. A few laughs broke the silence. My mother's lips curved into that gentle, rehearsed smile. Lila's always like simple things, she said. The room chuckled. I wanted to disappear. The truth was, I hadn't seen that shack since I was 12. I thought it had collapsed years ago. But that night, something pulled me there. The road curved around the lake, trees bending over like they were trying to hide it from me. The house, or what was left of it, sat hunched at the water's edge, half swallowed by vines and quiet. The door creaked when I touched it, but it wasn't locked. The air inside was colder than it should have been, tinged with cedar, old paint, and memory. That's when I saw the Eaton envelope, yellowed and leaning on the mantel. My name. My father's handwriting, postmarked 10 years before he died. Inside, a single line. Lila. When this finds you, the truth is waiting inside what they forgot to love. If this story caught your heart, to make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read them all, and your words keep us going. The letter was heavier than paper should be, sealed with the kind of care that meant secrets lived inside. My father's handwriting was clean, deliberate, like a man trying to control even his guilt. Inside were two things, a note and a hand-drawn floor plan of the shack. In the bottom corner, a small section was circled in red pencil. Lila, it began. If you're reading this, I couldn't tell you what I should have. Look where it all began. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. The lines were so simple, but they felt like a command from a ghost. I traced the red circle with my fingertip. It pointed to the corner behind the fireplace, the same spot where rain always leaked through, the one I'd ignored when I first walked in. It was ridiculous, but I grabbed a hammer from the shed and started chipping away at the plaster. Dust filled the air, the kind that smells like rust and time. Beneath the first layer was something cold and metallic. When I pulled it free, I realized it was a small tin box, dented and blackened by smoke. Inside, wrapped in brittle tissue, was a brass keychain. The engraving caught the light. Cross Hardware and Lumber, 1968. Our family business. My father had shut it down long before I was born, claiming I wasn't profitable anymore. But I remembered the stories, how it started small, how it kept the family afloat through 2 recessions. And yet, when he retired, not a single tool, not a single brick from that store made its way into our lives again. The keychain was warm in my hand, heavier than it should have been. I turned it over and found a faint scratch mark like someone had tried to file off another engraving, but I couldn't make out what it said. That's when my phone buzzed. Hannah. So, she said in her sugar-dipped voice, did you find gold in that dump yet? Dad was sentimental. Probably can help for losers. I stared at the keychain, thumb pressed into the worn brass. It's not gold, I said quietly, but it's something. She laughed, the kind of laugh that sounds like breaking glass. You always were good at pretending crumbs were a feast. The call cut off before I could respond. Typical Hannah, hang up before she could hear the truth. I leaned against the hearth, trying to make sense of it all. My father's letter, the map, the keychain from a business that supposedly died decades ago. Then the firelight caught something in the corner of my eye, a glint inside the soot-stained brick. I brushed my hand along the fireplace and my heart stopped. 3 letters, carved deep into the stone, RMC. The grooves were old, uneven, deliberate. I ran my fingers across them, the edges rough beneath my skin. They didn't belong to him. They didn't belong to me, but somehow I knew whoever carved them was the reason my father sent me here. And maybe, just maybe, they were the beginning of the truth he'd been too afraid to tell. Some walls gossip when no one's listening. The fireplace still smelled faintly of ash when I woke up, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying those 3 carved letters, RMC. I typed them into every search engine I could think of. The result that finally caught my breath came from an old digital archive. Ruth M. Cross, local hardware store owner, 1932-1987. My last name. My father's maiden aunt, the one no one talked about. I barely remembered hearing it, maybe once. Whispered like she'd done something unspeakable. Apparently she had. The article called he a controversial businesswoman who defied family tradition. No mention of what that meant. Just a line about legacy disputes and estrangement from surviving relatives. So why did her initials live inside my fireplace? I tore through every box and drawer in the shack until I found an old Bible wedged behind a shelf. Pages yellowed, edges crumbling. Inside, tucked between the Psalms, was a folded newspaper clipping, the same obituary I'd found online, but older, with a note scribbled in blue ink. Survived by no immediate family. No immediate family. Yet here I was. I read the note again, my hands trembling. Dad must have known about her. Maybe he even knew her story. But if she'd been erased, why leave her initials here for me to find? The brass keychain from yesterday sat on the table beside my coffee mug. Cross Hardware and Lumber, 1968. My father would have been a teenager then. The engraving was shallow, worn down from years of use, but I couldn't stop staring at it. The way the letters seemed too deliberate, like they'd been carved by someone who wanted them to outlive time. I drove to the nearest locksmith that afternoon. The man behind the counter was older, with the kind of eyes that had seen too many forgotten safes. He turned the keychain over in his hands, whistling low. Vintage, he said. Hardware tags like these were used for in-store lockboxes, back when people still trusted each other. Can you tell which one? I asked. He squinted at the edge of the brass, where the engraving had been partially filed off. He rubbed it gently with steel wool until the hidden mark surfaced under the light. His eyebrows rose. Well, would you look at that? What? He angled the tag toward me, and there it was. Faint, but unmistakable. RMC. Safe, too. My pulse thudded in my ears. Safe, I repeated. He nodded. Could have been anything. Business records, money, deeds. But if it's tagged like this, it wasn't just any safe. It was one of a set. I swallowed hard, my thoughts racing. Ruth's initials, her safe, her secret, buried under my father's silence. Outside, the air felt heavier, like the house itself was watching me now. Some families bury their shame. Ours apparently locked it up and left the key waiting for me to find. Numbers don't lie, but families do. The old Cross Hardware building sat on the corner of Maple and 3rd, now repainted in soft green and filled with the smell of roasted espresso. The sign above the door read Maple Bean Cafe, but I could still see faint outlines of the old letters beneath the paint. Cross Hardware and Lumber. I ordered a coffee just to look normal, but my hands were shaking. The brass keychain was still in my pocket, its weight an anchor. The wall behind the counter had a patch of plaster that didn't quite match the rest. Newer, smoother. I waited until the barista went into the back room, then walked closer, pretending to admire the vintage decor. The moment my fingertips pressed the uneven seam, I felt it. Hollow. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was adrenaline, maybe it was anger, but I pulled a butter knife from the napkin tray and started prying. The plaster cracked away in chunks until I hit something solid, a wooden panel. I tugged and dust poured out. Behind it, wedged between two studs, was a leather-bound ledger. I brushed it off gently. The cover was stiff with a community support disbursement. Mrs. Allen's medical fund, $200. School repairs, unrecorded expense, $115. Anonymous mortgage relief, 2nd Street, $480. Over and over. The same words appeared at the bottom of each page. Unrecorded assets. My chest tightened. Ruth hadn't been embezzling. She'd been giving, quietly, deliberately, to anyone who needed help. And then my father's handwriting took over. His entries were shorter, colder. Cease unrecorded donations. Reconcile discrepancies. He'd found her secret and buried it. I turned another page and a loose sheet fluttered out. It was a letter, half-written, never sent. Dean, you cannot erase good deeds with guilt. I trusted you to continue this, not destroy it. Her words looked furious, trembling with hurt. I read them until they blurred. My father had inherited not just the business, but the burden of silencing a woman who'd done more for this town than he ever admitted. The last page of the ledger stopped me cold. There was a single unfinished line at the bottom. Transferred to LC upon request. LC my initials. My breath caught. The air inside that cafe suddenly felt too thin. Who was Ruth transferring it to? Me, decades before I was even born? Or had my father kept her promise, waiting until now? The keychain felt heavier in my pocket again. Safe too. Maybe Ruth's ledger wasn't just a record of her kindness. Maybe it was the map to everything my family tried to forget. and everything my father wanted me to find. Smiles can't hide what the eyes confess. I'd been cleaning the shack's kitchen, scraping layers of grime from the cracked window, when my rag snagged on a splintered corner of the frame. Beneath it, half buried in dust and spiderwebs, was a photo. Its glass clouded with age, corners warped by humidity. I almost tossed it aside, assuming it was junk. But the faces pulled me in. A woman stood proudly in front of a newly built house, the same mansion my sister now lived in, every brick unmistakable. Beside her was a little boy, smiling widely, eyes full of light. Someone had drawn a sharp pencil line straight through his face. My throat tightened. On the back, written in soft cursive, Summer 1973, Laurel Ridge. Ruth's name was scrawled underneath. Ruth M. Cross. I turned the picture over again. The woman's expression was something between pride and warning, like she knew the photograph might outlive her version of the story. The boy's clothes were neat, pressed, his hand resting trustingly in hers. But why cross him out? I called my mother that night. She picked up after the third ring, her voice calm, careful, as if she'd been expecting my questions for years. "Mom," I said, "did you know Ruth Cross?" The silence on the other end stretched until I thought the call had dropped. Finally, she exhaled. "That name doesn't belong in our family anymore, Lila. She's in our blood. Her initials are carved into my fireplace." A pause. Then softly, "Please don't go digging into that. Some stories only hurt the people left behind." "I found a photo," I said. "She's with a little boy. He looks familiar." Her tone sharpened. "Throw it away. Why?" She hesitated. "Because your father already did." The line went dead. I sat in the dark for a long time, staring at the photo on the table, the boy's smile. Something about it gnawed at me. I knew that tilt of the chin, that stubborn spark behind his eyes. It wasn't just familiarity, it was recognition. The next day, I took the photo to Ben, my neighbor down the hill. He used to run a photography business before his wife passed, the kind of man who treated old things with reverence. He studied the photo, his brow furrowed. Whoever crossed this out pressed hard, almost tore through it. "Can you fix it?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "I can try." Hours later, his computer screen glowed with the restored image. The boy's face reappeared, delicate and young, but unmistakable. My father. He couldn't have been older than 6. Standing in front of Ruth's house, her house. Ben turned to me, confusion in his eyes. "That's Dean, isn't it?" "Your dad?" I nodded numbly. My father's eyes stared back from the past, smiling beside the woman my family swore never existed. On the back of the photo, beneath the dust and fading ink, another faint line appeared, one I hadn't seen before. "He'll forget me when the house forgets love." The handwriting was Ruth's. And suddenly, I understood why my mother didn't want me digging, because the house hadn't just stolen a name, it had stolen a love story my father was never meant to remember. Silence always has a signature. I'd been going through the shack's old dresser, the one that had warped drawers and smelled faintly of cedar and rain. When I pulled the bottom drawer too hard, the panel behind it shifted, like something had been wedged there long before me. A small envelope slid out, its edges yellowed and corners soft from time. My father's handwriting, unmistakable. The date on the top corner read August 18th, 2002, 3 years before he passed. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "If you're reading this, Marjorie, it means I didn't dare to say it out loud." I sank into the chair by the window, light cutting across the page. The house on Laurel Ridge was never mine to give. It was Ruth's, every board, every brick, every beam. She drew the blueprints herself. I was supposed to preserve them, not profit from them. But after she passed, the firm offered me a deal. Use her plans under my name and no one would question it. The mansion would still carry the Cross legacy, just under the wrong builder. My stomach twisted. My father, the man who spent my whole life preaching integrity, had built his empire on theft. I told myself it didn't matter, that Ruth didn't have heirs. But then you reminded me she'd raised me, taught me everything I knew about craft, about pride and honest work. I sold that, Marjorie. Sold her dream to pay our debts, to build our image, to make sure our daughters never live small. That house stands on my guilt. I could almost hear his voice in the words, steady but strained, trying to sound noble while confessing something that broke him. I left Hannah at the mansion because she was the one who understood image, but I left Lila in the shack because Ruth loved that place. She said the truth should be humble. Maybe one day Lila will see what we couldn't. I stopped breathing for a second. He'd known. He'd known that I'd come here, that I'd find this, that maybe somewhere beneath his pride, he wanted forgiveness. But one final line at the bottom made my skin crawl. Marjorie, burn after reading. The word burn was underlined twice. I turned the page over. The back was faintly singed, like someone had started to follow the order and stopped halfway through. The house creaked, a slow groan from the wind, but it felt like something else. A warning, maybe. Had Mom read this years ago and kept it secret? Was that why she couldn't look me in the eye when I mentioned Ruth? I folded the letter carefully and set it on the table. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger's. Someone carrying the weight of 2 generations of guilt. My father had stolen more than blueprints. He'd stolen the story of a woman who built everything and was erased for it. And now, the mansion that made my sister proud was standing on a lie. But the line that haunted me most wasn't about Ruth or the house. It was that final instruction, written to my mother, burn after reading, except she hadn't. And that meant she'd chosen silence instead. Money without a reason always has one. I drove to my mother's house before I could talk myself out of it. The mansion loomed on Laurel Ridge like it always did. Quiet, perfect, expensive. Hannah's car sat in the driveway, freshly washed, gleaming like a trophy. I wondered if she ever thought about where that shine came from. Mom answered the door in her silk robe, eyes tired, smile automatic. Lila. I wasn't expecting. I found Dad's letter, I said. The smile died. What letter? The one he told you to burn after reading. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the door. You shouldn't have gone digging through that place. That place was his truth, I said quietly. And yours. She looked away, voice trembling. Leela, you don't understand what your father went through. The pressure, the debt, the name we had to protect. Protect from what? From Ruth? I snapped. From the woman who built the home you're standing in? Her eyes flashed just for a second, with something between guilt and fear. She turned toward the sideboard and opened the drawer. From the very back, she pulled out a folded piece of paper and slid it across the table. It was a check, dated 1988. The ink had faded, but the amount was clear, $82,000. And under memo, it said nothing, just a blank line. Your father's lawyer arranged it, she said. After Ruth passed, they called it a settlement for property consolidation. But I knew what it was. Hush money. To make sure her name disappeared from every deed, every file, every foundation stone. My stomach turned. And you took it? Tears glimmered in her eyes. We had 2 girls to raise. Hannah was about to start at Yale. Your father said if we didn't take it, everything would collapse. His business, our reputation. I thought I was protecting the family. I laughed bitterly. You weren't protecting the family. You were buying silence. She flinched. You think I don't know that now? The room went quiet, except for the faint ticking of the grandfather clock. Another relic of Ruth's home. Another thing stolen and rebranded as ours. Where's the rest of it? I asked. What rest? The rest of the money. The part that didn't go to Hannah's tuition. Her lips parted, then closed again. I could see the calculation flickering behind her eyes, the instinct to protect Hannah at any cost. I don't remember, she whispered finally. That was a lie. A soft one, but still a lie. I left without another word. When I got back to the shack, Ben was waiting by the porch, dirt on his jeans and a flashlight in his hand. Didn't mean to start without you, he said. Floorboards were loose back here, so I pulled one up. He shone the light downward. Beneath the porch was a small trapdoor, edges rusted but intact. Something metallic glinted faintly beneath the slats, cold and deliberate, catching the light like a secret trying to be found. Ben looked at me. You might want to see this for yourself. The check still burned in my pocket. But whatever was under that trapdoor, that was where the truth was hiding now. Even secrets need foundations. The floorboards under the porch gave way with a groan that sounded almost alive. Dust rose in a soft gray cloud, and there, nestled in the hollow cavity, was a box. A deep mahogany chest no larger than a briefcase, its corners capped with tarnished brass. Someone had taken care to hide it well. Ben handed me his flashlight. Looks old, he murmured. It was. The lid was carved with delicate scrollwork, hand-tooled, not machine-cut. When I brushed away the dirt, the initials revealed themselves in elegant loops. R.M.C. Ruth again. The lock had rusted to dust. I pried it open carefully with a screwdriver, the hinge creaking like an exhale after decades of silence. Inside was a time capsule of a life I'd never been allowed to know. There were paintbrushes with frayed bristles, tubes of dried oil paint, and a small tin of colored pencils, their ends bitten and worn. Beneath them, bundles of sketches, architectural drawings, portraits of children, outlines of houses that looked achingly familiar. Each one was signed with that same neat signature, Ruth M. Cross. She wasn't just a builder. She was an artist, and she'd left her story here, waiting beneath the home my father called worthless. At the bottom of the box lay a sealed envelope, its paper yellowed, the edges crisp from time. In faded ink, the words read, "Do not deliver until the truth feels safe." I hesitated. Part of me felt like opening it would break a promise, but another part of the one who had spent her whole life being treated like an afterthought needed to know. The seal cracked with a soft sigh. Inside were 3 sheets of thick parchment, written in the same looping hand as Ruth's sketches. It was a will, her last one. It wasn't notarized, but 2 names were signed at the bottom as witnesses, Dean Cross and Marjorie Ellis Cross, my parents. My breath caught. To the daughter of Dean who still listens, the letter read, "I leave the home on Laurel Ridge and all its contents. May she restore what pride took away. The rest, let it rest." My hands trembled. The daughter who still listens. That was me. It had to be. Dad's letter, his map, everything he'd hidden. It all led here. Ruth had intended for me to have the mansion. The house Hannah now flaunted as her prize. I sank onto the floor, the weight of it all pressing down like the ceiling itself was holding its breath. Ben crouched beside me, his voice gentle. "Lila, do you realize what this means?" I nodded slowly, the words barely escaping my lips. It means Dad knew, and Mom helped bury it. Before I could say another word, tires crunched on the gravel outside. A door slammed. Through the window, headlights flared, and then Hannah's silhouette appeared, sharp and confident as ever. She strode up to the porch, heels clicking against the wood, voice cutting through the night. "So this is where you've been hiding," she said, eyes narrowing at the open box. "You do know you're trespassing on family property, right?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. And for the first time I realized she wasn't just here to gloat. She was here to make sure I never opened another box again. Some people don't argue to win. They argue to erase you. Hannah stood in the doorway of the shack, her heels sinking slightly into the warped boards. She looked around like she was touring a ruin, her perfume cutting through the dust. "Well," she said, curling her lip, "it's worse than I imagined. I can't believe Dad even bothered to deed this to you. The place looks like it's one storm away from collapsing." I didn't move. The mahogany box sat open between us on the table, the envelope and papers laid neatly beside it. "Funny," I said. "You never came out here when he was alive." She gave a short, cruel laugh. "Why would I? I was busy helping him maintain the real family property." I let the silence stretch before I picked up the letter. "You mean the one that doesn't legally belong to you?" Her amusement faltered. "Excuse me?" I unfolded the will, careful not to tear the fragile paper. Ruth's name. Dad's signature. Mom's, it's all here. The mansion was supposed to go to me, the daughter who listens, not the one who performs. Hannah's eyes flicked over the faded ink, her smirk returning just as fast. "Oh, please. You honestly expect anyone to believe this? An unsigned will? This could have been written by anyone. Nice forgery attempt, though." "It's not a forgery," I said evenly. "Then it's irrelevant," she snapped. "You really think you're going to steal my home with some old bedtime story about an aunt nobody remembers? Grow up, Lila. You always needed to make things bigger than they are." I opened my mouth to respond, but Ben's voice cut through the air from the corner. He'd been quiet until now, watching like a referee at a game he didn't want to witness. "Funny," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "It matches the property survey your father filed with the county. The layout, the signatures, even the witness marks. All are dated the same year as this will." Hannah turned sharply toward him, eyes narrowing. "And who exactly are you?" "Someone who actually knows what evidence looks like," he said. Her jaw clenched, the first crack in her polished armor. "You're unbelievable," she hissed. "You find some moldy piece of paper, drag a handyman into your fantasy, and suddenly you think you're the heir to a mansion?" I took a step closer, holding the will between us. "I don't think I'm the heir, Hannah. I know Ruth wanted me to finish what Dad ruined." The wind shifted through the cracked window, making the old beams groan. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Her eyes darted toward the box, toward the sketches signed RMC, the proof she couldn't unsee. Then mercifully my phone rang. Maya's name flashed on the screen, our family's longtime lawyer. I stepped away to answer, heart pounding. Her voice came through urgent and low. Lila, I've been reviewing Ruth Cross's old estate files like you asked. There's something in there you need to see. It's marked confidential addendum. What kind of addendum? I asked, a pause. Papers rustled. Once your father made sure it was sealed. It's addressed directly to you. The line crackled, then went silent. And in that quiet, I looked up to see Hannah staring at me. Not angry anymore, just afraid. Some truths get notarized twice. When Maya called, her tone carried the kind of weight that meant the past was about to speak. It's an audio addendum, she said quietly. Ruth recorded her estate statement before the written version. It was sealed at your father's request. When the tape began to spin, the room filled with a faint static hiss. Then her voice, warm, deliberate, unafraid. This is Ruth M. Cross. If this recording is being heard, I am gone, and the truth is overdue. I closed my eyes. She sounded so alive it hurt. She spoke about her home, her art, and her nephew, my father. Dean was like a son to me, she said. He made mistakes, but he meant well. I forgive him. But my home must never belong to pride. It belongs to whoever seeks love, not image. The air went heavy. I could feel my throat tighten. It wasn't just a will, it was a plea. A map of redemption she'd recorded for a future that might finally understand her. When Ruth paused, I could hear her breath tremble slightly before she went on. If Dean's children ever hear this, know that legacy means nothing without heart. The mansion was built for family, not status. Whoever remembers that truth will inherit it. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear hit my hand. Across the room, Hannah leaned against the wall, arms crossed, face cold. She's manipulating you from the grave, she muttered. I turned to her. She's telling the truth. Hannah shook her head, eyes burning. You always need a villain to blame. Dad made the choices he had to. You can't rewrite history just because you're jealous. I'm not rewriting anything, I said softly. I'm finally listening. She grabbed her bag and stormed out before I could stop her. The door slammed so hard the tape player rattled. Ruth's voice crackled again, softer now, like a whisper fading through time. If they still fight over bricks, let them. The shack holds the final proof. The reel clicked to a stop. Maya and I stared at each other, the silence louder than the recording. Final proof. Whatever Ruth meant, whatever she hid, was still buried somewhere in that old shack, waiting for the last person willing to dig for it. Art doesn't lie, it waits. After listening to Ruth's voice, I couldn't stay still. Her words haunted me. The shack holds the final proof. So I returned the next morning, the sun barely up, mist curling off the lake like breath from a secret. The walls inside still smelled faintly of paint and dust. I'd cleaned so many layers already that the old wallpaper had begun to peel, curling like it wanted to show me what was underneath. On the far wall beneath the window, a soft patch of color peeked through. Muted greens, faded whites, brush strokes. My heart pounded as I tugged the paper away. The hidden mural bloomed like it had been waiting for air, a wide field of magnolias, petals white as bone, spreading toward a distant blue sky. Beneath the soft paint, faint handwriting appeared, just visible under the light. I leaned closer, whispering the words as they emerged. Legacy is what's built in silence. It was her handwriting, Ruth's, her last message. I traced the line with my fingertips, feeling every stroke, every decision she made with her brush. She hadn't just painted beauty. She'd painted confession. Ben arrived an hour later, tools in hand. You sound urgent on the phone, he said, stepping in. I pointed to the mural. It's her. She left this for me. He crouched beside the wall, tapping lightly on the lower frame. There's a hollow space here. We pried at the wood carefully. Dust spilled out first, then a thin wooden plank popped loose, revealing a hidden pocket inside the wall. Inside it was a single folded paper, sealed with brittle wax. Ben handed it to me like it might break. You think this is the proof she meant? I nodded, though my chest felt tight. The seal cracked easily. Inside, on aged letterhead, were words that nearly stole my breath. Deed transfer. Laurel Ridge Estate, to be transferred to the female descendant of the Cross lineage upon review of moral standing. No signatures, just Ruth's scrawled name at the bottom, and my father's typed beneath hers, unsigned. I stared at it, disbelief and anger swirling in my stomach. It was everything: ownership, history, redemption. Ruth had tried to preserve the truth legally, but someone, my father, had buried it before she could finish. Ben stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. She meant for you to have it, Lila. She just didn't live long enough to make it official. I nodded slowly. Dad kept it here, hidden under her art. Because he knew. The words hung in the air like paint that would never dry. Before I could say anything else, the sound of tires crunching gravel cut through the quiet. Then voices, laughter, the sharp click of heels. The front door swung open. Hannah stood there with a man in a tailored suit, clipboard in hand, polite smile plastered across his face. "This is the place," she said brightly. "Try not to breathe too hard. It might collapse before closing." The agent looked around. "It's charming. Good bones." Hannah's eyes landed on me, then the deed in my hand. Her smile sharpened. "Perfect timing, little sister," she said. "I'm selling the mansion. Fast." The air seemed to shatter between us. She wasn't just trying to keep what she'd stolen. He was trying to erase the proof before I could use it. Some homes collapse before the roof caves in. By the time I arrived at the mansion, the open house was already in full swing. Cars lined the circular driveway, and I could hear laughter drifting through the front doors. Champagne glasses clinked, voices buzzed, cameras flashed, and Hannah had turned our family home into a showroom. The same home that wasn't hers to sell. Inside, real estate banners hung across the entryway. Strangers in designer coats admired the marble staircase like it was a trophy. I watched from the doorway, invisible at first, until Hannah spotted me. Her expression froze mid-smile. "What are you doing here?" she hissed under her breath, the charm evaporating. "I came to see what you're selling," I said, "and who you're selling out." The guests nearby turned their heads, curious. I reached into my bag and pulled out the rolled blueprints Ruth had drawn. Edges fragile, but still legible. I placed them gently on the grand piano. The inked signature, Ruth M. Cross, shone under the chandelier light. "Everyone," I said, my voice shaking but loud enough to echo through the hall. "These are the original plans for this house. They weren't my father's. They were Ruth Cross's, or great-aunt's. The real builder. The woman my family erased." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. The real estate agent blinked, unsure whether to intervene or let the drama boost the room's energy. Hannah laughed tightly, but her voice wavered. "Lila, please. This isn't the time for your conspiracy theories." I ignored her and unrolled a second document, the deed transfer Ruth had hidden behind her mural. "This," I continued, "is a legal deed naming Ruth's female descendant as the rightful heir to this property. My father found it, hid it, and then built his career on her work." Gasps whispered through the hall like wind through cracks. Someone started filming. Reporters from the local real estate column, invited for Hannah's success story, had their cameras out, lenses glinting like judgment. Hannah's voice cracked. "You don't even know what you're talking about. The peeling walls were gone, replaced with whitewashed boards that glowed in the morning light. The smell of cedar still lingered, but now it mixed with paint, coffee, and the faint buzz of laughter. The Ruth Cross Arts Foundation had opened its doors that spring. Local women came from all over. Students, single mothers, retired teachers, each one with paint on their hands and stories that finally had somewhere to land. The walls were lined with community murals, each brushstroke signed with initials instead of names, just like Ruth used to do. Ben managed the workshop area, where donated tools hung in neat rows. My father's old hammer, still engraved D. Cross, was mounted in a frame by the window, right beneath Ruth's architectural sketches. And Hannah, she surprised everyone. She came the first week, silent, just to see what all the fuss was about. But she stayed. She started teaching weekend design classes, color theory, layout, and balance. The same woman who used to measure success by square footage now taught children how to paint light on canvas. Every time I saw her smile, a little less sharp, a little more human, I knew healing had its own rhythm. Our parents came for the dedication ceremony in June. Dad had been gone for years, but Mom stood quietly beside me, hands clasped, eyes red. She didn't speak much anymore. Maybe she'd said enough in her life. The crowd gathered outside as I walked to the porch, the same one where the trapdoor had first revealed Ruth's box. A bronze plaque gleamed beside the doorframe. Ruth M. Cross, the woman they tried to forget. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my father's brass keychain, the one engraved Cross Hardware and Lumber, 1968. It was dull now, the metal worn smooth from years of guilt, forgiveness, and time. I knelt and placed it beneath the plaque. "She built the foundation," I said softly, my voice carrying through the stillness. "He taught me how to find the cracks. And she," I looked at Hannah, "taught me how to rebuild them." The crowd was quiet. Cameras clicked softly, but no one spoke. "Some fortunes aren't made of money," I continued. "They're made of truth, passed down when the world stops pretending." I turned back toward the house, sunlight spilling through the open door, washing everything in gold. The magnolia mural we'd restored stretched across the far wall, petals bright again. The words Ruth had left now gilded and visible. "Legacy is what's built in silence." The wind moved through the trees, carrying that truth across the lake, soft and sure. "They gave my sister the mansion," I whispered, smiling. "I got the shack. But inside it, I found everything they were too afraid to keep."